All right, let's dive right into this explainer about the messy, fascinating, and just totally experimental early years of the Teen Titans. When most of us hear Teen Titans, our brains instantly jump to those massive 1980s blockbuster comics or that amazing animated series we all grew up with. But the team's actual foundation, that was laid way earlier, between 1966 and 1978. So today we're going to explore the Silver and early Bronze Age era. It's a time packed with wild creative shifts, canceled books, sudden revivals, and some completely unexpected storytelling choices. And what's really fascinating here is the core question that haunted this original lineup. What happens when eternal sidekicks actually grow up? I mean, we all know that awkward transition from childhood into adulthood, right? Trying to figure out who we are. But in a comic book industry built almost entirely on preserving the illusion of eternal youth, characters just aren't supposed to age. Yet these early Teen Titans comics essentially functioned as a real-time coming-of-age story, complete with all those painful, awkward phases, shifting identities, and real growing pains. To map this out, we're going to track their journey chronologically across 4 eras. Sidekicks Assemble, entering the Relevance era, the 1976 Marvel-style revival, and finally, growing up and moving on.
Let's start with Section 1, Sidekicks Assemble, Early Years.
Now, the big takeaway here is just how fractured their publishing history was. A proto-team debuts in 1964, then they get an official launch in 66. But then, the series goes on a sudden publishing hiatus in 73, gets a revival and new numbering in 76, and finally faces cancellation in 78. It was this chaotic stop-and-go schedule that honestly kind of perfectly mirrors the unpredictable nature of being a teenager. Originally, this team was basically an after-school club for the sidekicks of famous Justice Leaguers. DC Comics was desperately trying to capture the youthful, vibrant energy that was selling so well elsewhere. So they mashed together legacy characters, Robin, Kid Flash, Aqualad, Wonder Girl, and eventually Speedy, into one supposedly hip unit. They were essentially the Juniorversity Justice League. But man, the awkwardness of those early issues is legendary. Fans and historians alike have called out the writing for using dated pseudo-slang indicative of what middle-aged white men thought that teenagers sounded like. Seriously, imagine these older writers completely disconnected from the 1960s counterculture trying to capture that youth energy. You ended up with sidekicks shouting things like "Groovy Daddy-O" while fighting wacky space aliens. It was definitely a product of its time. But times change, bringing us to Section 2, entering the Relevance era. As the 60s turned into the politically charged 70s, the tonal whiplash for the Titans was severe. They went from fighting wacky aliens with squeaky clean adventures to suddenly moving into an inner-city ghetto setting. Younger, progressive creators pushed the book to explore heavy, real-world issues, everything from urban environments and gang violence to Vietnam War protests. The team even lost their superpowers for a bit. The comic was just desperate to feel relevant to what was actually happening in the world. And to pull off this grounded approach, they introduced a massive shift, Mr. Jupiter's think tank. Under this mysterious, wealthy financier, the heroes did the unthinkable, forsaking their superpowers and costumed identities. They actually tried to solve human problems as regular young adults, without leaning on super speed or magic lassos. A super bold, if slightly jarring, experiment. This era also became a major sandbox for diversity. Writers Marv Wolfman and Len Wein introduced Mal Duncan, who eventually became DC's very first African-American superhero. They also brought in Starfire in issue number 18, a heroic Russian character. This was long before the alien Starfire we know today, and depicting a noble Russian hero right in the middle of the Cold War, that was a boundary-pushing move. Which brings us to 1976 and Section 3, the 1976 Marvel-style revival. After a 3-year hiatus, writer Bob Rozakis revived the book, and he totally flipped DC's traditional storytelling script. Instead of orderly missions and respectful sidekicks with static team rosters, Rozakis brought in the Marvelization of DC. We're talking constant interpersonal bickering, rapidly shifting rosters, and serialized soap opera subplots. Total chaos in the best way. The roster basically turned into a revolving door. You had Mel Duncan going through constant identity crises, switching from Guardian to Gabriel's Horn. You had the wildly confusing Joker's daughter, Dwella Dent. Plus, we got massive industry milestones with the debut of Bumblebee, an African-American superheroine, and the reintroduction of Beast Boy, now a teen TV star in Hollywood. And get this, the Titans were huge trailblazers here. In 1977, we get Titans West. This was the comic industry's very first regional superhero spin-off team. It actually predates Marvel's West Coast Avengers. It was a bizarre, super fun lineup of West Coast-based heroes. Also, for the first time, they started facing real supervillains. We're talking established heavy hitters like Dr. Light, the Fiddler, Two-Face, and Captain Calamity. This was a massive shift that laid the groundwork for the high-stakes action franchise the Titans would eventually become in the 80s. But all coming-of-age stories have to end. Section 4, Growing Up and Moving On. Over their 12-year run, these characters did something almost unheard of in comics. They aged from 14 to their early 20s. They went from needing Batman's permission just to leave town to being independent college students, living on their own, holding down jobs, and riding motorcycles. Bob Rozakis nailed this phenomenon when he said, over the course of their 8-year run, something happened with the Titans that did not occur in other comics. They aged. I started out reading their adventures a few years younger than the heroes and ended up a few years older. The readers and the characters literally grew up together. How cool is that? Which leads us to issue number 53 in 1978. The series was canceled, but the ending was surprisingly poignant. The heroes silently go their separate ways, realizing they have simply outgrown the teen title. They don't say a word, they just walk away into adulthood. It leaves you with this really compelling question. Was outgrowing the teen title the most realistic thing these young heroes ever did? In an industry totally built on the illusion of eternal youth, wasn't accepting adulthood the ultimate act of bravery for these sidekicks? They didn't go out in some massive cosmic battle. They just grew up. And I think that's exactly what makes the messy, experimental Silver Age of the Teen Titans so unforgettable.